Okay, welcome to day 4 of our research project. Today, we'll be working toward a standard. Integrate and evaluate multiple sources of information presented in different media or formats, as well as in words, in order to address a question or solve a problem. So this will be the standard we'll be trying to meet during our reading portion of this research project. The learning goal today is to integrate information presented in a complex nonfiction text to address a question. You'll be successful today if you can identify information in our complex nonfiction text that will help you think and write about how the internet is changing our lives. You're going to take notes in 3 categories. What do you know? What do you want to know? What did you learn? So, just to give you a little bit of an idea of how we'll approach this, when you take notes when you see something in your reading that you know, you might put in an ellipsis in the margin. If you see something that generates a question for you, you might put in a question mark. And if you see something that is new learning for you, you might put in an exclamation point. By jotting those in the margin, that will kind of help you sort out how you want to write things in your notes when we pause during the reading. So the book today, we're going to be reading Chapter 1 of Cognitive Surplus by Clay Shirky. Shirky is a professor of media at NYU, and in his book, he basically says that since our society has grown up watching TV primarily, we're at a time of potential positive change, because instead of sitting and just watching a screen, the internet and computers allow us to interact and create. And so he says there's great potential. He doesn't necessarily say that computers have already made everything perfect. Actually, he doesn't say that at all. But his general argument is that we've gotten more free time as technology has advanced. And when everyone's sitting around watching TV, we're basically wasting our capacity to create and solve problems, and the internet will allow us to meet our potential. So, here's how we're going to take notes. Gin, television, and cognitive surplus. In the 1720s, London was busy getting drunk. Really drunk. The city was in the grips of a gin-drinking binge, largely driven by new arrivals from the countryside in search of work. The characteristics of gin were attractive. Fermented with grain that could be bought locally, packing a kick greater than that of beer, and considerably less expensive than imported wine, gin became a kind of anesthetic for the burgeoning population enduring profound new stresses of urban life. These stresses generated new behaviors, including what came to be called the gin craze. So I want to put an exclamation point in the margin, because the gin craze is new learning for me. Also, gin push carts. I'm not familiar with gin push carts, so that's new learning. Gin push carts plied the streets of London. If you couldn't afford a whole glass, you could buy a gin-soaked rag, and flop houses did brisk business renting straw pallets by the hour if you needed to sleep off the effects. It was kind of social lubricant for people suddenly tipped into an unfamiliar and often unforgiving life, keeping them from completely falling apart. Gin offered its consumers the ability to fall apart a little bit at a time. It was a collective bender at a civic scale. So rather than write long notes, what I want to do while I'm reading is just kind of keep those annotation ideas in mind. So this part of the text is people were suddenly tipped into an unfamiliar and often unforgiving life. I'm going to put an ellipsis because I already know that industrialization throughout time has caused, big changes in the way people live, and that those require adjustments. So that's not new learning to me. I might also put a question mark because I do have questions about alcohol use at the time and how new was rampant alcohol use in cities, that kind of thing. That is a question that I might write. So I'm going to save my notes. Okay, so while we're reading, we'll be making those kind of notes in the margins. When we pause from our reading, we'll put our notes in 3 categories. What do we know? I know that increased industrialization has caused major changes to the way people live for a long time. I wrote a question. How is the gin craze during industrialization related to the internet and information age? These are some notes I wrote later in the text. And I wrote some learning later on in the text. But that should serve as a demonstration for what we're going to do while we're reading today. So quick annotations that might be an ellipsis, a question mark, and an exclamation point, and then longer notes on paper when we pause.